Hello, everybody, and welcome to the American Cinematheque at the Los Feliz 3. Thank you all for being here for the Sweet Smell of Success, co-presented and co-hosted by the Greg Proops Film Club podcast, available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Mr. Greg Proops will be up here in just a second, and you will all get to enjoy a live taping of said podcast. But first, I want to mention a couple things. Thank you to everyone in here who is a member. We couldn't do any of the things that we do, none of the screenings, retrospectives, playing movies on film. None of it would be possible without the membership support, so thank you guys. And if you're not a member and you have any questions, come talk to us about it in the lobby. We got lots of cool stuff coming up this week. Just after this, we are playing Seven, the brand new 4K restoration, if you want to stick around for that. That's playing a couple times through the weekend. Social Network tomorrow and a couple more times through the weekend. Ridley Scott's Prometheus tomorrow. You just saw the David Lynch trailer, of course. There will be an ongoing David Lynch retrospective in the coming weeks and months across all three theaters, so stay tuned for more on that. And the last thing that I will say is just please turn your phones off, and when the movie is on screen, no phones out at all. That's a very big deal here. We hate seeing phone screens. And that's it for me. So without further ado, please help me welcome to the stage our host, Mr. Greg Proops.
Hooray, hurrah, and welcome to the Greg Proops Film Club, located here at Hollywood's most enchanting film confabulation, the Los Feliz 3. Yes, it's the American Cinematheque, and once again, the Greg Proops Film Club can join so that we may find solace in the magic of the silver screen and eschew our daily workaday troubles. Tonight's feature is the 1957 classic, produced by Burt, Lancaster, and directed by Alexander Mackendrick, The Sweet Smell of Success. This is where you applaud. Thank you very much for coming out tonight, ladies and gentlemen. This picture is wow. What can I say about it? If you have can I just ask, which I never do, but I'm going to tonight, how many people have seen this picture before? Oh, okay. Thank you for raising your hands. I can't see you. I have bromium Klieg arc lights in my eye, but thank you very much. I did notice some waving. Some people have seen it. If you have seen it before, then you know what an astonishing motion picture this is. And if you haven't seen it before, yeah. Hold on to your hat, because this really explores the fantastic depths and dizzying heights that absolute corruption and venality in show business and the media, and therefore is, of course, a resounding metaphor for, I was going to say today, but let's not. Let's just say American society in general over the last 450 years. Let's talk first about Tony Curtis. Tony Curtis is so goddamn sexy in this movie and so unbelievably repellent at the same time. And it's a magic combination. Tony Curtis is in so many awful movies that it's almost uncountable. Movies like Boing Boing and The Shield of Falworth and whatnot. And then he's in 3 or 4 extraordinary motion pictures. And by the way, this picture's 1957. The next year he did a picture called The Defiant Ones with Sidney Poitier, which is also a very worthy movie, where him and Sidney Poitier are chained together. They escape from a chain gang, and they're manacled together, and they have to escape, a black man and a white man, in the South in the 50s. And then the next year after that, he did Some Like It Hot with Billy Wilder and Jack Lemmon. So the late 50s is really an extraordinary time for Tony Curtis's career. By the 60s, things changed, and by the 70s, I think we all know what happened. But let me say this about Tony Curtis. One, he was a delightful movie star. When I was a little kid, I loved him. He just had that easy breezy, fantastically sleazy quality that made movie stars so accessible. He was everything I thought a movie star should be. He had bitchin' hair. He had a fantastic New York accent that he never drops in any movie. I believe if you've seen Spartacus, fantastically, Laurence Olivier says to him, "And what did you do when you were a teacher?" And he says, "I taught music to the children of my master." And that's in ancient Rome. When so many people were from the Bronx part of Italy, Tony Curtis was in the Navy, and he said that he spent all of his time looking at his reflection in the ship and thinking about how he was going to be a movie star. And then when he got out of the Navy, he got a GI Bill, I was going to say a loan, but you know, he was able to go to acting school. And so he went to the Actors Studio in New York. He also attended the Actors Studio in New York with Walter Matthau. And Walter Matthau is a genius actor who, of course, is in many later Billy Wilder movies and has a superb career of his own. By the way, if you don't know who Walter Matthau is, he's gigantic and has a hangdog face. He's the opposite of Tony Curtis in every respect. He's enormous, he's kind of ugly, he looks like a basset hound, and he's extraordinarily funny. And Walter Matthau's giant secret was he was quite a good actor. And when he played anti-heroes and bad guys, he was absolutely mortifying. Tony Curtis knew that he was beautiful and told everyone about it, and I think slept with anything that was a biped during this period. Walter Matthau fantastically called himself the Ukrainian Cary Grant. Tony Curtis got to make a picture with Cary Grant, and Cary Grant was his favorite movie star. And he had, till the day he went away, Tony Curtis said Cary Grant was his favorite movie star, and that getting to do a picture with him was the greatest thing of all time. It's a movie called Operation Petticoat, which, yeah, it's some highly intellectual shit. And Tony Curtis does Cary Grant in the movie Some Like It Hot. And if you've never seen Some Like It Hot, it's Jack Lemmon and him witnessed the St. Valentine's Day massacre. They're musicians in Chicago, and they witness gangsters shooting up other gangsters. And the gangsters see them and make them, and they have to go on the run, and they hide in an all-girl band. When they join the all-girl band, Marilyn Monroe happens to be in the band, and Tony Curtis tries to put the make on her by pretending to be a rich guy. And he went to Billy Wilder, the director, and said, I'm going to do Cary Grant in the movie. And so Tony Curtis talks like this, dude, would you mind moving so I can see my yacht? So after they finished the picture, and Billy Wilder let him do it, of course, Billy Wilder screened the movie for Cary Grant. And he said, well, what did you think of Tony Curtis doing you in the whole movie? And Cary Grant went, I don't talk like that. Tony Curtis was on the radio in the 80s, and I remember listening to an interview with him. And they said, do you mind being a star? And this is Tony Curtis in a nutshell. He said, no, why should I? When I walk into a place, I get the best table. And when I go on a plane, they put me in first class. He absolutely, apparently I find this much more amusing than you. He absolutely had, if you recall the story Candide by Voltaire, he had Dr. Pangloss' view of the world, that this is the best possible world of all worlds, and that there's no two ways about it. Because I'm famous and because anyone will sleep with me, the world is great, was Tony Curtis' outlook on the universe. And you have to adore him for that. You do, because he was breezy and delightful. So I went to see a Billy Wilder tribute. Are we going to talk about this movie? Soon, my darlings. I went to see a Billy Wilder tribute over at the DGA. And for the people listening on the podcast that aren't here tonight, that's the Directors Guild of America. And they're very important. They're in charge of taking the plot out of all of the movies in Hollywood before they're disseminated. So, oh, I'm sorry, that's the producers. But the Directors Guild had a Billy Wilder night, and they had all these famous people there. And Curtis Hanson, that wonderful director who's no longer with us, was there and spoke. Jack Lemmon was supposed to come but was ill. So Tony Curtis got up, and he said, when they were making Some Like It Hot, Billy Wilder told them that their women's clothing was going to be made by Dory Sherry, and they were so excited. He said, me and Jack Lemmon were dancing. So they went to the fitting to get their clothing, their women's clothes, and it was Marilyn Monroe, Jack Lemmon, and Tony Curtis. And he measured everybody, and then he got to Marilyn Monroe and said, your ass, this is Tony Curtis telling the story, your ass is bigger than Tony Curtis. And Marilyn Monroe went, but does he have tits like these? That was the story Tony Curtis told at the Billy Wilder tribute. I saw him at the Cinematheque years ago at the Egyptian, and they showed this very picture, The Sweet Smell of Success. When the picture was over, and you will do it tonight, whether you want to or not, everyone stood, because Tony Curtis was there in the house, and it was so goddamn compelling in this movie. So they said to him, what was it like working with Alexander Mackendrick, the director? And he went, Alexander Mackendrick was a wonderful man and a marvelous friend. And then they said, what was it like working with Burt Lancaster? And he said, Burt Lancaster was a wonderful man and a marvelous friend. What was it like working with Clifford Odets? Clifford Odets came in and helped punch up the script and was there and doing pages and typing in the back of a car and handing them to the cast. Clifford Odets was a marvelous man and a wonderful friend. So it wasn't the most expressive night of Tony Curtis, but he was, again, absolutely compelling as an actor. Now, the thing that I will say about this picture is Clifford Odets, who was brought in to work on the script, Ernest Lehman wrote this. And Ernest Lehman wrote a little novel, which in those days, fantastically, they called a novelette. Yeah, it was a short novel, so it was a novelette. And now I guess you'd say a novella. And Ernest Lehman adapted it for this. So they brought in Clifford Odets to help with the script. And Clifford Odets was one of America's famous lefties, although he did give some evidence to the House Un-American Activities Committee. And he really was writing pages on the set of this movie and handing them to the actors. That's how this movie was shot. It is an absolutely immediate movie in terms of they had the idea, they had the story, and the script kept getting changed because Clifford Odets kept dipping and deeper into the characters and revealing more from what they had initially. And Burt Lancaster, who produced the movie and is the star, spent his entire life battling for civil rights and being a screaming liberal. He was on Nixon's enemies list in the 70s, Burt Lancaster. You think to yourself, what did Burt Lancaster do? Well, if you're paying attention at all to what's going on right now, it doesn't matter if you do anything. As long as you're not a white supremacist, racist asshole, you're suspect. And what I wanted to say about this was, not only the director and Burt Lancaster, Clifford Odets, Tony Curtis, almost everyone involved with this picture spent their entire life being a liberal-minded, civic-minded person. They were all very brave and put themselves on the line time and time again and got in trouble for their beliefs and their viewpoints. Burt Lancaster, when AIDS became an enormous plague in the 80s, and I can't remember the name of the president of America then, but he ignored, thank you, I'd rather not say his name. He ignored, he arranged for Iran to not give up the hostages so that he could beat Jimmy Carter in the election in 1980. And then he proceeded to absolve himself of the fact that there was an enormous plague running through the gay community, even though he had been an actor and most certainly was aware of what was going on. Because Reagan was one of the most vile people that's ever held office in the history of the United States. And, as an added bonus, was also president of the Screen Actors Guild. There you are, show business in a nutshell. So, when AIDS became an enormous crisis, and Rock Hudson finally got AIDS, and that made normal straight people finally sit up and be aware that AIDS was an issue, Burt Lancaster absolutely went to the forefront and spoke out about AIDS, and spoke on behalf of people with AIDS, did public service announcements, and along with Elizabeth Taylor and a few other people, was one of the few vocal people to actually be concerned and put his heart forward and to put his entire career forward. Because believe me, in the 80s, a lot of you are a little too young to remember, it was an enormous crisis. And people were very, very hesitant about helping and or caring about people with AIDS. Because, like so many things, oh, it's happening to them, it couldn't possibly happen to me. So I think that there's a great deal of bravura in this movie. Now, the movie's topic is show business. And the man that they're absolutely doing a take on is a columnist named Walter Winchell, who, in the days of the great newspapers and radio shows, was the most powerful and evil columnist in America. During the 40s, Walter Winchell had been quite liberal and, much to his credit, detested Charles Lindbergh, which I think is the mark of an awesome person in some ways. Charles Lindbergh was the first Nazi to fly across the ocean in a plane by himself and cross the Atlantic alone in a plane. did I say the first Nazi? He was the first American. He also happened to be a thoroughgoing Nazi. And then pretended to have his child killed by a German man. And because it was the 30s, everyone was willing to blame the German guy. And they executed the man who absolutely did not kidnap and kill Lindbergh's child. So Lindbergh was one of those great Americans, the kind like we have now. And I think he would fit right in as a hero for this lot. And in any case, Walter Winchell was virulently anti-Nazi in the 30s and during the war. And then something snapped after the war. And he became, when they started chasing communists, he became a virulent anti-commie person and a commie chaser. And to give you an idea of the kind of people that he was aligning himself with, we're talking about Senator Joseph McCarthy, who was Ted Cruz with a press agent, and thank you, Roy Cohn, who he became very friends with. And you've heard Roy Cohn's name bandied about. I believe a recent person who held office in this country actually exclaimed during his last term, "Where's my Roy Cohn?" Roy Cohn was also one of the most evil, pernicious, insidious, and awful people that ever strode across the American landscape. So Walter Winchell made it his crusade to hammer on everybody and really, really reinforce that whole persecuting people for having been communists, of which Clifford Odets was one. And that's why Ernest Lehman used the character that you'll see Burt Lancaster play, J.J. Hunsaker, in the picture, because he had worked as a press agent himself. And Ernest Lehman said, and by the way, Ernest Lehman only wrote a couple of other movies, The Sound of Music, North by Northwest, and West Side Story. So Ernest Lehman's career was sketchy. He's a wonderful screenwriter, and you'll get his humor and his vitriol in this movie. What sets this movie apart from so many 50s movies is its burning cynicism is matched by the absolute magic of the setting, the lighting, the cinematography, and the music. Elmer Bernstein did the score. There's a jazz cat named Chico Hamilton, and you'll see him in the picture because they go visit. There's a jazz element to this movie, which makes it super awesome. Even though it's fully in the rock and roll era, they stuck with the jazz in this. And Chico Hamilton plays some numbers in this movie, and you'll see him. And if you buy the soundtrack or stream it, there's a lot of groovy jazz in this movie that Chico Hamilton did. James Wong Howe is the cinematographer of this movie. And James Wong Howe was the master of low light. So when you see this movie, it's almost all, you see so many 50s movies in their day for night. We were watching one the other night, and it's clearly the sun's out, but it's nighttime and they're driving. This picture does none of that jazz. You've never seen New York look so wet and greasy in your life. It is completely glistening with moisture. And James Wong Howe invented, at the beginning of his career, a technique to film people who had blue eyes, which was a real issue in the black and white pictures, to get their eyes to shine. He put black velvet around the camera like that and around the light so that it bounced off the actors with blue eyes. And actresses loved him for that. In fact, the actress that he first started doing it for was an actress named Mary Miles Minter, who was involved in a fantastic murder scandal in the 20s where they killed a director named William Desmond Taylor. I don't think this has been sordid enough so far. I feel like I'm sugarcoating a lot of this for you guys. Any story that includes Marilyn Monroe's breasts, Roy Cohn, and Mary Miles Minter, and the death of William Desmond Taylor is definitely a story worth watching. I think you'll find that this picture is one that absolutely grabs you. I wouldn't say that it's an uplifting movie like A Basket of Flowers or Kisses from a Child or Smelling Warm Cookies in a Room or hearing a whispered inference from a butterfly. It's more like being chased by the cops until you run out of breath and then having to lie to someone to get into their house and then trying to sleep with them. That's the feeling that this movie gives you. You may want to take a shower and have a stiff goddamn drink when this movie's over, And I give you, from 1957, directed by Alexander Mackendrick, the classic Sweet Smell of Success.